This was from the federal courthouse today in Richmond, Virginia, the Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. I will read to you from this ruling. Quote, "It is difficult in some cases to get to the very heart of the matter, but in this case it is not hard at all. The government is asserting a right to stash away residents of this country in foreign prisons without the semblance of due process that is the foundation of our constitutional order. Further, it claims in essence that because it has rid itself of custody, that there is nothing that can be done. This should be shocking not only to judges, but to the intuitive sense of liberty that Americans far removed from courthouses still hold dear. The government asserts that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a terrorist and a member of MS-13. Perhaps, but perhaps not. Regardless, he is still entitled to due process. If the government is confident of its position, it should be assured that that position will prevail in proceedings to terminate the withholding of removal order. Moreover, the government has conceded that Abrego Garcia was wrongly or, quote, mistakenly deported. Why, then, should it not make what was wrong right? Quote, the Supreme Court's decision remains, as always, our guidepost. The decision rightly requires the lower federal courts to give due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. The Supreme Court's decision does not, however, allow the government to do essentially nothing. It requires the government to, quote, facilitate Mr. Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent there. Facilitate is an active verb. It requires that steps be taken, as the Supreme Court has made perfectly clear. Facilitation does not permit the admittedly erroneous deportation of an individual in disregard of a court order that the government not so subtly spurns. Facilitation does not sanction the abrogation of habeas corpus through the transfer of custody to foreign detention centers in the manner attempted here. Allowing this would, quote, facilitate foreign detention more than it would domestic return. It would reduce the rule of law to lawlessness and tarnish the very values for which Americans of diverse views and persuasions have always stood. The government is obviously frustrated and displeased with the rulings of the court. Let one thing be clear. Court rulings are not above criticism. Criticism keeps us on our toes and helps us do a better job. Court rulings can overstep, and they can further intrude upon the prerogatives of other branches. Courts thus speak with the knowledge of their imperfections, but also with a sense that they instill a fidelity to law that would be sorely missed in their absence. If today the executive branch claims the right to deport without due process and in disregard of court orders, what assurance will there be tomorrow that it will not deport American citizens and then disclaim responsibility to bring them home? And what assurance shall there be that the executive will not train its broad discretionary powers upon its political enemies? The threat, even if not the actuality, would always be present, and the executive's obligation to take care that the laws be faithfully executed would lose its meaning. Today, both the U.S. and El Salvadoran governments disclaim any authority and or responsibility to return Mr. Abrego Garcia. We are told that neither government has the power to act. The result will be to leave matters generally, and Mr. Abrego Garcia specifically, in an interminable limbo without recourse to law of any sort. The basic differences between the branches mandate a serious effort at mutual respect. The respect that courts must accord the executive must be reciprocated by the executive's respect for the courts. Too often today, this has not been the case, as calls for impeachment of judges for decisions the executive disfavors and exhortations to disregard court orders sadly illustrate. Now the branches come too close to grinding irrevocably against one another in a conflict that promises to diminish both. This is a losing proposition all around. The judiciary will lose much from the constant intimations of its illegitimacy, to which by dint of custom and detachment we can only sparingly reply. But the executive will lose much from a public perception of its lawlessness and all of its attendant contagions. The executive may succeed for a time in weakening the courts, but over time, history will script the tragic gap between what was and all that might have been. And law, in time, will sign its epitaph. It is, as we have noted, all too possible to see in this case an incipient crisis. But it may present an opportunity as well. We yet cling to the hope that it is not naive to believe our good brethren in the executive branch perceive the rule of law as vital to the American ethos. This case presents their unique chance to vindicate that value and to summon the best that is within us while there is still time. While there is still time. That ruling today written by a high-profile conservative judge on the Fourth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals. In case it's not obvious, the point of that ruling is to deny the Trump administration what it was asking for, which was an emergency stay to let them avoid what the courts have thus far very plainly ordered them to do. This ruling on the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case, in which the Trump administration has been ordered to bring him back to the U.S., this that I just read you, this comes on the heels, of course, of yesterday's ruling that it's not just Kilmar Abrego Garcia. The Trump administration has been ordered to retake U.S. custody of all these guys, of the hundreds of men who the Trump administration sent to El Salvador for potentially life imprisonment without any court's adjudication as to their fate inside the United States. Remarkable rulings these last 2 days, particularly this ruling tonight from the Fourth Circuit. But I just want to say, in the spirit of Paul Revere tonight, I just want to note that the courts are not riding alone here. This stuff does not happen in a vacuum. You ask scholars of authoritarianism and dictatorship, and they will tell you that it's never just one thing that works in terms of resistance. It's everything together. And in our country, specifically on this issue at the sort of sharp end of the stick here on immigration, we really are seeing all kinds of resistance and strategic refusal and sounding the alarm all happening all at once. And it is mutually reinforcing. When you start seeing it come from all directions, it feeds on itself. It gains momentum. It gets bigger. And right now it is everywhere. It is in the courts. It is also in communities. It is in civic life. It is in political life. It is in the press. And it is in the streets. And I mean that all very specifically and literally. This is St. Paul, Minnesota, yesterday, outside the consulate of El Salvador in St. Paul. People in the streets lining both sides of the road demanding that the Trump administration follow the court's orders and bring back Kilmar Abrego Garcia and bring back these men who they have shipped to that foreign prison. This was Santa Rosa, California yesterday. Local clergy leading a rally in support of immigrants and against what Trump is doing. This was Denver, Colorado yesterday. Again, local clergy leading a protest, a rally in support of immigrants and against the Trump administration's treatment of immigrants. This was Grand Rapids, Michigan yesterday. Local people protesting against Trump administration plans to open an immigration prison, a so-called detention facility in their community. This was New Orleans yesterday, people protesting at ICE headquarters in New Orleans, Louisiana. These students yesterday protesting against how they're going against immigrants and international students at Kennesaw State, in Cobb County, Georgia, and in Newark, Delaware at the University of Delaware. When the Trump administration took a young man who's a legal permanent resident named Mohsen Maddow in Vermont this week, the community where he lives, where he is absolutely integrated into that community, they sprung into action. They were worried that Trump's agents were going to come for him. His friends and supporters had created a text group called Mohsen Just in Case to prepare a support plan, a network, a communication in case it happened. They were with him when the arrest happened. They made sure to film it, to make sure that it was posted on social media, that they alerted the press. They had prepared for the worst with lawyers who had prepped in advance legal motions to stop him being removed from Vermont and flown to one of these immigration dungeons, for lack of a better word, 1,000 miles away in Louisiana or somewhere. And because they had those prepped in time, those motions worked. A judge was able to order him kept in Vermont while he was still in Vermont before they had time to spirit him off elsewhere. Vermonters have since been protesting at the prison where he is being held in their state. Mr. Maddow is Palestinian. He was born and raised in the West Bank. They brought Palestinian flags to show their support for him. And they banged drums and yelled as loud as they could in the hopes that he could hear them inside the prison. Now in Vermont, the Democratic leadership in the state legislature says they want to terminate their state's contract with the federal government to keep immigration prisoners, immigration so-called detainees in the state's prisons, in their own facilities. That's Vermont. In Raleigh, North Carolina, the Trump administration has just sent notice to 24 Christians who fled Afghanistan when the Taliban took that country back over. They are legally here in this country. They were given legal permission to stay here for obvious reasons. For not obvious reasons, Donald Trump is now taking that away and telling these Afghan Christians that they have to return immediately to the tender mercies of the Taliban right now, this week. It is a Christian church in Raleigh, North Carolina, that's advocating for them.
At the Apostles Church in Raleigh, there's a community of Afghans, many going through the same thing. Pastor Nick Kaminsky says the church has organized resources to help asylum seekers navigate the process.
It's a very personal issue. These are individuals, men, women, children that we know and have come to know and love.
That's Raleigh, North Carolina. In Utah, it's people who are legally here from Haiti and Venezuela, who are part of the community that they live in Utah, who are beloved there. Their neighbors in Utah are stepping up to help them and also to sound the alarm.
It's time for you to leave the United States. That's the first line of a letter from the Department of Homeland Security to several refugee families here in Utah legally. News specialist Dan Rascone is covering this story and joins us live. Dan, this has left neighbors shocked and upset.
It really has, Deanie. That's exactly right. Shocked, upset, angry, and also heartbroken that several of these families got this letter from the Department of Homeland Security telling them they got to be out of this country by the end of the week.
I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm embarrassed.
Emotions running high.
It's not right. It's inhumane.
For this group of neighbors in Mill Creek.
We love them and they love us.
Gathered together to fight for 3 refugee families.
I feel sad, really sad.
That arrived in the U.S. and in their area not long ago. All of them getting this letter from the Department of Homeland Security saying, quote, "It's time for you to leave the United States. Your parole will terminate in 7 days."
Unimaginable. The government that we love would do this to people we love.
Honestly feel like family to us.
2 of the families are from Venezuela, the other from Haiti, all too scared to identify themselves.
The letter said that I was supposed to leave.
This mother from Haiti has a 2-year-old daughter.
I was in shock because I wasn't expected something like that to happen because I came here legally.
Attorney Jim McConkey with the Refugee Justice League is helping the families get representation.
We're dealing with a group of people that are here legally. And the letters that were sent intentionally are designed to bully and mislead these people into believing that they don't have rights.
That's Utah. That's Mill Creek, Utah. Those neighbors standing up for their neighbors who have been taken. It's protests, it's community life, it's also civic life. These students at Harvard today rallying to support international students at Harvard, who the Trump administration is threatening as a group, threatening en masse. As their own university, one of the highest profile and most prestigious universities in the world, takes a firm stand against the administration and says they will not accede to Trump's demands. We're going to have more on that coming up in just a moment. But you know what? If you look just outside Harvard Yard, if you look at the hometown press in Boston, you will see not only standing ovation level support for Harvard choosing to wage that fight, you will also see in the biggest local paper, the Boston Globe, you'll see them today leading with a brand new investigative piece into these vigilante groups that have been claiming credit for feeding individual student names to the Trump administration for the administration to then target those people for arrest and deportation. The Globe's investigation today reviewed a so-called students deport list from one of these groups. Quote, it sometimes placed students at the wrong universities or featured people who were not even in the United States. One woman on the list was pictured wearing a hijab and identified as a Harvard student from Nigeria who had already been detained in Massachusetts. The group claimed she should be deported because her visa had been revoked in March for a pro-Hamas rally speech. Contacted by the Globe, the woman said she has never attended a pro-Hamas rally, she has never attended Harvard, and in fact, she has never visited the United States. An hour south in New Bedford, Massachusetts, the local NBC station Channel 10 has dug into this horrifying video in which ICE agents smashed through the window of a car to drag a man and a woman out of the vehicle. They report that the ICE agents repeatedly while they were doing this, referred to the man in the car as Antonio. They insisted that that was what his name, and it was Antonio who they were looking for. Nobody in that car was named Antonio. It really does appear to be a case of mistaken identity. Local press has been covering it intensely, while ICE is defending its conduct by saying whether or not he's Antonio, the man was not in the country legally, and so, you know. The New Republic was first to report that one of the police officers responsible for the disputed gang designation for Kilmar Abrego Garcia appears to have himself been soon thereafter suspended from the police force for serious misconduct in an unrelated matter, which, of course, goes to a police officer's credibility on a matter like this. USA Today was first to report that in the case of the gay makeup artist who the Trump administration sent to El Salvador, potentially for life in prison, his supposed gang affiliation was due to a single officer with a history of serious credibility and disciplinary problems, including driving his car into a family's home while intoxicated, after which he was summarily fired. Now we've got increasing press coverage of the Trump administration sending get out of the country immediately letters to at least 3 U.S. citizens, 2 of whom are lawyers in Massachusetts and 1 of whom is a random doctor in Connecticut. All of them American citizens, all inexplicably told by the Trump administration that they must get out of the country within a week. And all of this press coverage, while it's depressing because of the subject matter, it is also incisive investigative press coverage. And it does have the effect of exposing the shambolic and slapdash and utterly incompetent behavior of the Trump administration as it embarks on this cruel and unconstitutional adventure for which it wants to be feared and respected. And instead, they look ridiculous and cruel in equal measure. And that has the effect of shaping public opinion about what they're doing. And that fuels not just protests, and lots of them, but also lawsuits. Reuters reporting that on Tuesday alone this week, federal judges in at least 7 states issued orders blocking the Trump administration from acting against international students that it is trying to arrest. Lawsuits in Massachusetts, Montana, Wisconsin, Washington, D.C., New Hampshire, Michigan, everywhere, and more filed every single day. Those legal roadblocks tend to turn up information. The tide of incisive investigative press about what the administration is doing turns up yet more information about what Trump is doing and who he's hurting. And all of that information builds the public case, further galvanizes more public opinion against them and more protest against them. And you know what? If you keep eventually going like this stuff snowballs and it builds on itself. And eventually you are going to embolden elected officials to make them believe that it is time they better take action. And eventually you are going to end up with a U.S. senator in El Salvador himself trying to get his constituent out of there. And on that front, we have breaking news tonight. Just as we are getting on the air tonight, we have learned that Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democrat of Maryland, has been able to meet with imprisoned Kilmar Abrego Garcia. The government of El Salvador posting 3 photos online of the senator meeting with Mr. Abrego Garcia a short time later. Senator Van Hollen confirming that he did have a chance to meet with his constituent. He said, quote, "I said my main goal of this trip was to meet with Kilmar. Tonight I had that chance. I've called his wife, Jennifer, to pass along his message of love. I look forward to providing a full update upon my return." It is unclear where that meeting took place. It is unclear what Mr. Abrego Garcia's current status is. We are working on getting more information from Senator Van Hollen's office. We will bring it to you as we get it. But note, none of these things on their own is enough. But all of them together are really something. And all of them together just might be enough, right? 1 if by land, 2 if by sea. Fast horses, a relay of riders to alert everybody along the way, everybody ready to do their part. We've had 250 years of training for this. We know what to do.